Hi there, everybody. Today I'm here to talk about the first ever feature film, which was The Kelly Gang, which came out in 1906. But not only is it the first ever feature film, it's more notoriously known as the first ever film to be cursed by a witch. Now, reports came out at the time shortly after this film started making the rounds. Initially, it was quite popular because, of course, it was the first ever feature film ever made, so that got a lot of publicity, a lot of attention. It did quite well at the box office because, it was kind of the only competitor in that category and, a trailblazer at the time. But the newspapers did report that a witch had cursed the film. Now, this curse seemed to affect patrons seeing the film. They would lose their hair and they would go slightly more pale. And it was reported in one of the newspapers at the time that apparently had an interview with the witch that the witch was upset with the lack of dogs in the film. And she thought that the film would actually feature dogs quite heavily. With a name like the Kelly Gang, it's quite easy to understand why, because that name alone evokes, if it came out in the cinemas now and I just heard the title, the Kelly Gang, I would assume that was a film along the lines of something like Beverly Hills Chihuahua or Marmaduke, a film that would focus on a group of dogs, perhaps pulling off some kind of bank heist or perhaps trying to free their friends from a pound. The Kelly Gang, that sounds like a dog movie, but instead it was a movie about Australian outlaws in the outback, fighting against the police. And it's rubbish. It's a trash idea. No one really cares about that kind of stuff. I understand why a witch would curse this film. But as it happened, everyone from then on who saw the film, they lost hair and they went slightly pale. Now, this isn't the first case of a witch doing a similar curse. Of course, if we look to things like vegetables, there's several noticeable witch curses there, like parsnips. Parsnips are clearly carrots that have just been cursed by a witch. That's all a parsnip is, a cursed carrot. I don't know if a farmer was the one who got cursed. He may be upset a witch somehow. A witch said, "I'm gonna curse all your prize-winning carrots." Turned them white, made them taste weird, and he just sold them off as a parsnip. This is something new. This isn't a cursed carrot at all. Please buy it. It's called a parsnip. I know it looks like a cursed carrot, but it's not. It's a brand new vegetable that I discovered in my own backyard. No, he was lying. It was a cursed carrot, and everyone's been eating cursed carrots ever since. Parsnips. Exact same thing goes for cauliflower. What do you think it is? Cursed broccoli, of course. Everyone's been eating cursed broccoli ever since. I don't know if it was the same farmer who was growing the carrots that got, both vegetables cursed. Maybe it was a double whammy. He's growing carrots, growing broccoli, which comes up to him. You've been cussing me. You've been doing some kind of thing that made me really upset. Gonna curse your veggies now. But it's the opposite effect. He managed to market them at a upsale value. It's a brand new vegetable. Tastes weird, tastes completely different. And, they look pale, they look white, they look, quite frankly, like rotted fruit, rotted vegetables, rotted, diseased food. If you see a food that's gone pale, gone white, it's normally a sign, don't eat this anymore. If it's lush green, if it's colorful, bright orange, that's the signal to dig in. That means eat. But if it goes that kind of white color, that means normally, don't eat this. This is trash. But it clearly paid off. Now, another noticeable example of a witch's curse affecting our lives so deeply, so meaningfully, perhaps something that happened a lot earlier than the vegetable curses, is dog poop. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm walking down the street and someone hasn't cleaned up after their dog for a week or two, I'll see poop that's completely white. Now, it doesn't come out if the dog's white, but after, a week or two of being outside, it'll be completely white poop. And if you took your own poop and, you pooped in a tub or something and you kept it outside and you checked on it in several weeks, it wouldn't be white. It'd still be, same kind of poopy color, maybe a bit darker, maybe, it'd be a bit crustier, but it wouldn't be white poop like a dog's poop. You can check this more, scientifically. If you have a dog and you get them to poop in the backyard, then you sit down, squat down next to where the dog's pooped, and you take a poop right next to the dog where the dog had pooped, and you have those two poops side by side. And you come back in, a week or 2 weeks time, you're gonna notice one of those poops white. It's not gonna be yours. So there's a lot of speculation as to why a witch actually cursed dog poop. It's quite obvious that witches love dogs, especially noticeable by the Caligang movie Curse. Perhaps a witch hundreds of years ago had maybe dozens of dogs, and she loved those dogs, but she did not love the pooping and the process of cleaning up after the poop. And in her anger and in her outrage of maybe having to clean up a lot of poop one day, she just placed a curse on the dog poop, and it's affected all dog poop for all time ever since. So that's quite a significant curse that a witch did, and it's quite fascinating that all these witch curses are quite similar in that they make things quite pale, quite white. Except in the case of people, well, also in the case of people, but additionally, it removes their hair. And so shortly after this film came out, it was popular, it peaked, then the curse caught on, and people started catching on about that. People said, we don't want to be cursed, we don't want to lose our hair, we don't want to look like albinos, we don't want to turn white, and people stopped seeing it. And that's how it was for decades. It pretty much dropped out of existence. No one saw the film. People knew about the curse at that time. They weren't interested. They weren't interested in being cursed. It's understandable. Until, so this happened for maybe half a century. And then in the early 1960s, they started screening it again. Not because it was a good film, because it wasn't. It didn't have any dogs in it, so of course it could never be a good film. But they started screening it purely because of the historical value, Oh, this is the first feature-length film ever made. It's, who cares if it's not very good? It's got historical value. So people started seeing this film just purely because of the historical value that it had. And at that time, everyone had forgotten that the film would curse you, make you go white, make you lose all your hair. People were outraged. They had a lot more technology in those days. They had the news, they had television. It caught on, went around the world. Everyone was outraged by the film. Everyone was protesting. Everyone wanted their hair back. Everyone wanted their skin to not be so white. There were massive protests, especially in Washington. In 1963, that was the peak of the protests. Now, it just so happened that Martin Luther King saw one of these protests, and he was deeply affected by it, but he thought that the protest was a racist protest, like an anti-African American protest, because he was walking down the street one day in Washington, and he saw people with signs that said, like, go away. Now, that sign, he thought, was directed at him because he had planned a significant march for the black community, and he thought that was directed towards black people. But it wasn't. That was, trying to keep people away from seeing the film. Don't get bald. Don't get affected by this film. Don't get the curse. But then other signs were like, enough is enough. Generic sign. Could be about anything. It's a staple of most protests. You go to any protest around the world, you'll see a sign that says enough is enough. It could be about anything. It's about the human condition, that sign, you know? It affects all of us very deeply. Whatever is on our mind that we've had enough of and we think is enough, that's what we think it's referring to as enough. If we think someone's out to offend us and we see something that says enough is enough, we think they're talking about us. And if we say enough is enough, people are gonna think the same. It's like, all right, you talking about me, you think enough of me is enough. But it was about this movie. Then there was another specific sign. Now this is referenced directly in Martin Luther King's biography, that he saw this sign and it affected him extremely deeply, caused him a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. He saw a sign that said, "Beware the black and white curse." Now at that time, pretty much every film was in color. Color was all the rage. They had the technology. There were really no black and white film screening at the start of the early 60s. Everyone had started moving to color. So this was specifically referring to the Cali Gang film that came out. Now, you know, everyone was deeply hurt by this sign who was marching with Mr. King, as was Mr. King, but it didn't refer to racial segregation or anything like that. It referred to the curse. Now, you read that sign as Martin Luther King, you think, my goodness, this is about, you know, people hate mixed race coupling. Beware the black and white curse. That's what's going through their mind. They think, if we mix races, there's something wrong. There's something wrong there. But that's the people doing it. They didn't think that at all. But as well as that, the people who were protesting, they were bald and they were extremely white. So they looked a lot like the proto-neo-Nazi, which had cropped up around that time. So they see these bald, hairless people who are very white. You know, there are even people of color who were protesting the movie, but they also looked white at that time. So Martin Luther King couldn't have known any better, but that actually went on to inspire him to give his magnificent "I Have a Dream" speech. He actually came up with that speech later that night and gave it at the Washington Monument just several days later. And perhaps we wouldn't have been blessed by such a historic and moving speech, one of the greatest speeches of all time, if you ask me, if it weren't for that film, the Cali Gang, and if it wasn't for a witch cursing the Cali Gang, maybe we wouldn't have come so far as we have today in terms of racial harmony. It's really something to think about. Now, I myself saw this film, and the version I saw was heavily edited. Most of the footage had been destroyed in those protests, as well as lost to time. So the original runtime of the film was about 60 minutes, but I think I only saw about 10 to 15 minutes of actual footage, and the rest of it was extremely damaged footage or title cards. Title cards that described what had happened in the initial film. Clearly, because the whole film wasn't there, I didn't lose the hair on my head or my eyebrows, but if you look at it, I actually lost quite a significant amount of arm hair. Normally, I'm known for being an extremely hairy man. I normally have very macho-looking arm hair. I look extremely, strong and macho and just like a macho man, really, because of how hairy I look. My chest, it used to be like full dark black hair. I used to be, covered in hair all over my back as well. Just a extremely hairy looking man. Now I don't look like that. I don't look so masculine or macho anymore. I would go to the beach and people would scream, get that dog off the beach. And I would turn to them and I would say, I'm not a dog, I'm a human being. And they would say, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. You're that hairy that you look like a dog. But now that I realize that you're actually a person, I'm quite attracted to you because that hair is a sign of masculinity and macho-ness. And that's something that they're very attracted to. And I would say, well, I accept your apology, and I'm glad to hear you find me attractive and masculine and macho. I don't get that anymore. Now that I'm pretty much hairless on my body, I go to the beach. People don't care. People don't scream in fright and think I'm a dog. People don't compliment me about how masculine I look like I'm a dog, like I'm a handsome dog or a handsome bear or some kind of very masculine, handsome man covered in hair with a hairy body. People don't think that anymore, and I kind of feel a bit saddened by that because that fed a lot into my personality. I was well known as a hairy man, and now I'm not a hairy man anymore. I used to be very beefy and masculine, and now I'm not anymore. So I am a little bit upset at the witch's curse, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, since I know that the film itself and the witch's curse went on to inspire racial harmony thanks to its impact on Martin Luther King through the protests of the skinheads who were just so happened to be regular, normal people affected by the witch's curse of this 1906 first ever feature film. Now, looking more into why the witch cursed the film, before that time, there were a lot of short films coming out, and most of those films with these starting filmmakers, at the time there were a lot of stray dogs. So you would see a lot of these stray dogs in early cinema, and they wouldn't be integral to the narrative. The filmmakers wouldn't intend for them to be there, but they certainly didn't mind because everyone loved seeing these dogs appear on the film. They would be in the middle of a take and a dog would come up to one of the characters. And what they actually noticed in early test screenings is, despite the narrative happening over here, there would be a little stray dog that would walk onto the frame over here, and everyone would be suddenly glued to looking at this small stray dog. And that led to some of the proto dog films that came out. And just the year before the Kelly Gang came out, there was a hugely popular film called Rescued by Rover, about a small child who was kidnapped by some horrendous drunkard, and the family dog went on to save the baby. And I think without the pioneering impact of this filmmaker, we wouldn't have such smash hit films today like Marmaduke or Show Dogs or Cats vs. Dogs or Beverly Hills Chihuahua. A hugely impactful film, and that was really pioneering it, and that came out just the year before the Kelly Gang, and that was hugely popular. So clearly the witch who saw this film was expecting more of the hype train that was these dog movies that seemed to be taking the early cinema film world by storm, and she didn't get that. But thankfully, just 2 years after the Kelly Gang film came out, there was a movie called The Dog Outwits the Kidnapper, or something along those lines, about a kidnapper who kidnaps a child using a car. But when the kidnapper gets to the house, and the dog's been chasing them the whole time, but they haven't noticed, they run inside, and they're gonna get another crony out, or they're unlocking the door and they're gonna run back for the baby. But then the dog gets in the car and drives away. I'm sure if the witch saw that film, maybe she would have would have blessed that film or something like that, because that was, that was hugely influential in cinema. That dog driving the car, and especially so early on, you're still seeing those kind of narratives even today. Even today, you're seeing dogs driving cars, and it's all thanks to that early pioneering dog work. And I would advise anyone who hasn't seen it to watch the movie Beverly Hills Chihuahua, because not only is it a beautiful film about, like love and caring, and showing dogs on screen, which everyone loves. Everyone loves a dog film. I don't know if there is a film around today that doesn't have a dog in it that isn't great, And same goes for the opposite, I don't know how many actual good films there are out there that doesn't highly display a dog, maybe as one of the lead actors. And Beverly Hills Chihuahua, I think, is a beautiful combination of all that stuff, kindness, everything, as well as a focus on, racial understanding. And there's a huge focus in that movie about racial understanding from people from different creeds, cultures, everything. And that's a really, really, really beautiful film. And that's something I advise everyone to see, Beverly Hills Chihuahua. And I think also, I kind of say this a bit begrudgingly, but if you do want to lose your body hair, if you don't want to be a hairy person, if you want to lose the hair on your chest and arms, I recommend going to tracking down a copy of The Cali Gang to watch, the 1906 Cali Gang. If you're very hairy and macho looking, if you're a macho man and you don't want to be a macho man anymore, and you're tired of people calling you a dog or Wolverine or Wolfman or anything along that line, watch it, because there's a good chance you're going to lose that hair. Again, I used to be extremely hairy looking. It was a huge part of who I was. People would recognize me for how hairy I am, I would stand out in a crowd, and not anymore. So if that's something you're interested in, I would advise tracking down this film. And I would advise watching all the dog films that you possibly can. And if you're a witch and you're out there, please don't curse me. Please don't curse this video. Please don't curse any future videos unless you have a really good reason for it. I don't know if in this day and age not having a dog in the movie is a good enough reason to curse it. I would still understand why you would do that, but I would ask that, I don't have a dog in this video. Please don't curse this video. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Don't curse this video. Thank you. Bye-bye. Where did I leave my shoes? Where did I leave my goddamn shoes?